Hi everyone, this is William Vanstone from Suncross Publications. So you've perhaps watched some of my other videos already, and so today I'm going to get started on, my analysis of the Major Arcana. So we're going to start off with the first card, card 0, which is the Fool. And you'll notice, yes, the oohs and ahs with the hologram. So this is a self-portrait of yours truly. It's based off a picture of an infamous horror author. His name is Thomas Ligotti, and he wrote a book, I forget what year it was, but it's called Conspiracy Against the Human Race. And so he had he has a very warped worldview, and this is like a portrait that was done of him. There aren't very many pictures of him. He has a lot of mental illnesses. He's very reclusive. He's a strange guy. So his view is antinatalism. He believes it's morally wrong to have children. So what's interesting about the Fool is that it implies new beginnings, a transformation, a new start. So I would say that this worldview that this guy has, that this is based off of, is a foolish perspective. And yours truly, the author, I feel a lot of guilt. So my story, what I did this whole deck for, to serve as illustrations for, is called Sacred Heart of the Purple Dawn. And it's about guilt and redemption. It's kind of like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. So the author, yours truly, goes through a transformative alchemical process, going through the whole deck. This is something I might have talked about earlier. And basically the author is reborn, in a sense. So he starts off with this very negative worldview, borderline nihilistic, and then now the author believes something else entirely. In fact, the author would admit to feeling very confused and conflicted, that life is too mysterious, that the author doesn't really have all the answers, doesn't really know, feels very guilty, conflicted, doesn't know, but he's adopted a very different perspective from when he first started out. So he starts off as this guy, and he becomes something else. So the next card in the deck is the Magician. This illustration is based off of the character from Breaking Bad, Heisenberg. And so he's wearing, it's me. Well, it's a version of me, but also my friend Aaron, not his real name. So it would have been about 2 years, I worked for a drug dealer. He grew magic mushrooms and sold them, and also weed. My parents were very sick, and they were some of the earliest people with the medical marijuana thing. He grows the magic plants and has the magical experiences, thus the Magician. Ta-ra! And you can see I'm wearing the hat like Mickey Mouse in Fantasia. And so yes, the Magician is all about creative, transformative experiences. That's the meaning of the card. And so he's like a sort of innocent figure, but really not so innocent. So this is the beginning, like what I was talking about, the transformation experience. So we've gone from this now to this, and so the character is developing. So he goes through some interesting experiences, and then he's one of the pivotal characters in the story, and then things develop further along where basically the author, yours truly, gets more than he bargained for. So you can see now this is the spread. So this is my tarot mat, and here, this will come into play later on. This is the Tree of Life. I'll get into that later. Next card we have in the deck is the High Priestess. So this is a vampire minion. She's one of the characters in my story, and she's seated between the two pillars of Freemasonry, Boaz and Jachin. And so what the Freemasons were obsessed about was rebuilding the Temple of Solomon, which is a metaphor for basically rebuilding the human body. So good spiritual health would be defined as having a healthy body. So yeah, the author's gone through this experience where, okay, the magician starts the process of alchemy leading to this. So that's the project, getting into good physical health. So the story, there's a theme of bad health, bad mental health. And so as much as this seems like the drawing is a negative inverse of that, that's really the beginning of the message. That good spiritual health is good physical health. So the next cards we have in the deck are the Emperor and the Empress. So the Empress is, well, this is Michaela Lefebvre, and she's one of the antagonists in the story, a villain. She's a vampire witch. And this is Benoit Sylvestre. He's the leader of the werewolf biker gang. And then these two have a conflict in the story. So they're the lead antagonists. And I guess, yes, the other cards that I just showed, well, I'm sort of the protagonist. I'm not really, though, that good a character. It takes a transformative process to become good. So really, these two cards, well, they're obsessed with being in charge. And if you get into the history of tarot, it started around, well, a little bit before the Middle Ages, and there was the court of Charlemagne, who was trying to rebuild the Roman Empire through the Holy Roman Empire, and so he declared himself emperor. So the emperor and the empress, well, they're really obsessed about being in charge. It's all about domination, power, and control. And they're not necessarily the best leaders, though. They have the right personality for the job, but they want to be in charge too much. So, okay, they have a conflict. He's the leader of a werewolf biker gang, and she's a vampire witch. And so, this guy, there's a thing in the story where it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody's read Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club, where maybe this guy is the protagonist, or is he? It's hard to tell. You decide. Welcome back, everyone. So this is continuing the video series about the Vanstone Tarot. I have this next card, card number 5, the Hierophant. So the Hierophant is a priest character. He's like a religious figure, very spiritual. These two, I have two versions of it. They're fairly similar. But anyways, this is based on Thich Quan Duc, which I'm not pronouncing his name right. He's the Vietnamese fire monk. So I lived overseas for a couple of years. I was in Vietnam. And that particular monk, he self-immolated during the Vietnam War. And when I was over there, he seemed to me, it was very dark, but to be the only moral person. All this immorality, the stuff that the communists did, the stuff that the Americans did, all the war crimes, all that stuff. So rather than participate in all of that, he self-immolated. So we can see he's a Buddhist monk. And in Cambodia and Vietnam, a lot of the Buddha statues have the snakes, the cobras behind them. And they'll typically be about 7 or 8, and that symbolizes the 8 different chakras. Well, really there's 7, but then there's an 8th one as well too. And yeah, so he would rather set himself on fire than participate in the immorality of this world. And to me, that was kind of like he was like a modern day Jesus. And he actually made a statement, and what he did brought publicity to what was going on in Vietnam, and thus he earned this spot here as the Hierophant. Go. So this next card is the Eon, or Judgment. So it depicts an obelisk, and it's a very strange obelisk, a Celtic cross. It appears many times in my story, sort of as a bad omen. Lots of symbolism here. We can see the sigil of Saturn. We can see the eye of Horus, and other strange markings. This card is very significant, and it says here in Latin, Novus Ordo Seclorum Annui Queptis, which I'm not really brushing up on my Latin too much these days. I'm not going to tell you what it means. I'm not going to tell you everything. But yes, it's a very powerful omen, this card. So this is kind of spooky. Not related, well, kind of, yeah, related to Suncross Publications, but they're filming something there. And then this is hanging with this crane thing. And it's some kind of an art installation, or they're filming a movie. I see indications down there. Walking around earlier, there's these cars, film set, film crew. But that's like a black cube. To me, like, yeah, the black cube of Saturn. Alright, let's zoom in. Yes, very peculiar. That's what I think it is, but I stand to be corrected. So the next card, and I'm not going in numerical order, is card number 13, Death. Death gets a bad rap. So in this case, I have Death depicted as Father Time. And Father Time's a precursor to the modern Grim Reaper. He started off as this figure, an old man with the white beard and the scythe, and he's depicted with the planet Saturn. And as I was saying in one of my other videos, I deal with the theme of Saturn a lot in my story. I'm basing it off a book called The Saturn Myth by David M. Talbot. And he has a website, the Thunderbolts Project. He gets into all of it, where Saturn was our original sun. So Father Time, basically he's Santa Claus. He's the constellation Capricorn. Yeah, he comes up in a lot of places, and he's now transformed into the modern day devil. So the mythology with Saturn is that Saturn was our original sun. We had no winter. We had no concept of time. There was no day. There was no night. It was perpetual twilight. And Saturn got dethroned and bound in chains, which got him his rings, and he was cast out to the far reaches of our solar system, and it was a cataclysmic event. The ancient Greeks and Romans talked about the Golden Age, and Saturn oversaw the Golden Age. And I initially thought, well, this is very romantic. What's the problem with this? Why is he the devil? Well, because we have winter in our current paradigm. We can't live in the Golden Age. To live in the Golden Age, only a select few can, and that comes at the price where basically everybody else has to pay for it. So yes, only an elite, L. Yes, and Saturn was known as L. There's a good guy to look into his videos and his work. He's called Jordan Maxwell. He was the original David Icke conspiracy theorist. He's a guy that believes in the shape-shifting reptilian aliens. So he gets into the origin of words, right? El was the god Saturn. So why are they called the elites? Oh, because they get elected. And then what happens to them when they're elected? Well, they become an elder. So yes, El was our old god in the modern age, because yes, we can't live in the Golden Age. The constraints of winter force us to adopt the Judeo-Christian ethic. So the number 13 all has to do with the mastery of time. So if we had 13 months as opposed to 12 months, we would have 30 days in every month, and we would be in perfect alignment with the cycles of the moon and the stars. So yes, the number 13 is very important. 12 signs of the zodiac plus 1, that's you. But without Saturn, without time, we wouldn't have winter, we wouldn't have discipline, and he provides a structure to our universe. He is the black cube. He is the force that animates our universe and keeps everything together in the current cosmic order that we have. This next card is Justice, or Adjustment. So, the protagonist, yours truly, William Vanstone, the story gets into, well, it fictionalizes real events. So yours truly, I was arrested. It was only for a night. It was related to being involved in the drug business. And the story gets into it. It's quite complicated. I don't want to spoil everything. But justice or adjustment is fairness. So the black cube of Saturn rules over justice. It provides structure and discipline. That life really isn't that chaotic. Chaos can be at times fairness. The scales at the end ultimately do balance, and we can see the scales there. Lady Justice is blind, as she's often depicted in courthouses. But yes, it's the ultimate fairness. Everybody gets their comeuppance. Karma is a universal law. Every cause has an effect. And it happened to the author, and I learned a lot of painful life lessons. So it's all in my story. Read all about it. The next card is the Devil. Now the Devil is ruled over by the black cube. And the black cube of what? The black cube of Saturn. So I've talked already a whole lot about Saturn, but what's interesting, there's more interesting stuff with Saturn. On Saturn's south pole is an eye. Well, it looks like an eye. So it brings new meaning to the expression, he knows when you are sleeping, he knows when you're awake. He's Santa Claus. Yes, so the black cube is a metaphor for the planet Saturn, and it's something that you're going to want to Google, the black cube of Saturn. So Muslims worship Mecca, which is the black cube. There are Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews, that wear a black cube on their hat. And the black cube's also depicted in 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. So the black cube is a geometrical pattern that, as I was saying earlier, provides structure to our universe. So he is the devil, and I've already gone on about the devil with card 13, Death. So the devil rules over addiction. He is the guy that punishes sinners. So if you're bad, he will punish you, but he provides order and discipline, and he once oversaw a golden age. But yes, we can't live in the golden age, because to do so, only the elite, only the select few can. So he provides temptation. But he's providing at the same time order to our universe. So yeah, that's the devil. This is kind of a schizophrenic drawing, and you can see on the side panels, all of my cards kind of follow a pattern. So we have the astrological sign, we have the elemental sign, and we have the Hebrew characters, plus the name of the card and the name of it in French. And all of my cards follow a similar pattern. Next card is the Hermit. The Hermit's all about solitude, reflection, introspection, pause, and self-doubt. So he's depicted with the one eye. And I've gone on a little bit about the eye of Saturn, how Saturn has on its south pole an eye. There's a lot of interpretations to the one eye. In this case, it's the Oedipus complex, and that's a story, very Freudian psychology, but about how Oedipus wanted to sleep with his mother and he killed his father, and then because he found out that's what he did, he didn't realize that was the case and he cut out his own eye. It's a very dark story. Freud was obsessed with it, but there's a lot of interpretations to the one eye symbolism. So we got the eye of Saturn, we got the eye of Providence, which is on the back of the dollar bill with the pyramid and the all-seeing eye. There's a lot of interpretations to the one-eye symbolism. So this is a character from my story, Old Man Thibodeau, that runs a dépanneur, which is like a convenience store in Quebec. And he's very critical to the story as it develops. I'm not going to give it all away, but he's seen here depicted with a lantern. He's looking out, and he looks very reminiscent of Odin, another one-eyed god. And Odin is in the Norse mythological tradition. He's Saturn. So yeah, there's a lot of interpretations to the one eye, but in this case it's just drawing people to consider that they should spend time in solitude and reflect. This is card number 6, the Lovers. So, very important card. It depicts the author with a female lover of the past. Lots of symbolism in this card. So they're in the Garden of Eden with the forbidden fruit. So the lovers, in this case, it's all about transmuting sexual energy to a higher purpose. The symbolism is dark. We have about 12 crosses, which symbolize the 12 apostles of Jesus. But we have this dark monster here, and what is it? Well, it's the one-eyed god again, symbolizing the sodomite gateway. So being sodomized leads to a kind of dark illumination. But that's not the meaning of the card. Really, this is a form of blasphemy. And it's a theme in my story. I get into it, where sodomy is a kind of form of abuse and trauma. And the sodomites talk about the one-eye symbolism a lot. It comes up in art all over the place. And after being the recipient of sodomy, you'll see a flash of white light. But that's a false god. It's not the real illumination. We also have the serpent symbolizing the kundalini of the spinal column. So yes, the Garden of Eden is a metaphor for transmuting that sexual energy, the kundalini, going up the spine to a higher purpose, leading to enlightenment. But the sodomite gateway is not true enlightenment. It is a false god. It is a false prophet. Only by transmuting that energy can we obtain higher states of consciousness. This card is Temperance, or art. It depicts the Ouroboros. So, the Ouroboros is infinity, but there's two kinds of infinity. So in this case, it refers to synchronicity, the idea that there's just the eternal present. And this symbol, Carl Gustav Jung, was a famous psychologist, and he was obsessed with this symbol. He even wrote a whole essay about this symbol. It's an archetype that's found all over the world in many different religions, and it was embraced by the Vikings, who called it Jormungandr. And Jormungandr has a battle with Thor, which gives birth to the Tree of Life. As I may have already talked about, I get into that for the Tree of Life card. But it was also embraced by the ancient Jews, who believed in reincarnation, the Kabbalah Tree of Life, and Jesus, who was involved loosely with the Order of Essenes. So the idea is that there is no beginning and there is no end. There's just the eternal present. The beginning is the end and the end is the beginning, and time is an eternal cycle, the snake eating its own tail. But, in a weird way, as dark as it seems, it means that there is no death. We've done this before and we'll do it again. And my story is all about themes of time loops and coming back in a way and doing all of this over again. My character is stuck in a time loop, and he comes to a realization about this. It's a complicated choose-your-own-adventure story. So those were very popular in the late 80s and 90s. And so it was like, okay, to turn left, turn to page 10. To turn right, turn to page 20. Or something like that. So you could choose, it would present you with options where you could make choices. And I have about 4 different endings. So based on the choices you make in the story, it leads to different endings. Also with that, it's coded with gematria, which, as I talked about before, is a kind of cipher using numbers and letters. And so that, based on the choices that you make, it spells out a word or a phrase. And it is kind of complicated, and yes, choose your own adventure stories got replaced ultimately by role-playing games, but they are an interesting thing. So one of the endings, one of the themes, one of the paths you can choose leads to the realization of the Ouroboros, that the nature of reality is we're stuck in a weird kind of time loop. And the Buddhist kind of got into this a little bit, and then those dark, really weird, depressing German philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer, got into it. They discovered a lot of the old Buddhist texts, and they were translators. They were really smart guys, but they didn't understand the concept of reincarnation. They didn't get that it was all about realms, and I've talked a little bit about that already with my one card, the Wheel of Fortune. But they thought of it as the eternal return. Not that you would be reincarnated into a different realm, but just that you would live the same life over and over and over again. But it's weird that they were these devout atheists and they embrace something that is oddly religious. And it's very peculiar that this symbol, as I said, is found all over the world. Really, every religion features this symbol in some way, shape, or form. And that I believe many religious spiritual traditions came to a similar realization that we're trapped in a time loop. So there is no end, there is no beginning, there's just the eternal present. So the next card, not going in numerical order here, card number 10, the Wheel of Fortune. So I have two different versions of it, but really it's the same card. I think personally that this one's the better version, but it depicts the Buddhist wheel of reincarnation, spun by the demon Maya, also known as Samsara. So it depicts all the various realms in Buddhism. So we have the human realm, we have heaven, we have the Titan realm, the warlike gods, we have the realm of hungry ghosts, which that is like a kind of hell. They're these ghostly spirits that are basically drug addicts. So it's the hell for addicts. Then we have the regular hell, and then the animal realm. So I spent, as I was mentioning before, a little bit of time in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, and I traveled to a lot of these Buddhist sites, and I went to a place called Angkor Wat, which is considered the Hindu Mecca, but it's a lot of Buddhist stuff there. When I was over there, honestly, okay, I was sympathetic towards this worldview and this religion, but upon reflection, I detected kind of a demonic presence, if I remember right. And so, yes, it's rightly depicted as a demonic figure. The Buddhists identified the problem, not that life is suffering, that's an oversimplification. They simply stated that the problem is we can't go to a place and stay there. Life is transitory, that the problem with hell is that it's not forever, if that makes sense. And there's no way to translate the word they use for this. They call it dukkha. It doesn't translate very well, so we go with suffering. But the point is that we go on the wheel. We travel through all of these realms, perhaps even in a single lifetime. So you'll experience the animal realm, you'll experience the human realm, you'll experience hell. And yours truly, I've been in the realm of hungry ghosts. And yes, it's not a place that you want to go. Lastly, I'll mention the Bhava chakra, which is known as the Bindu chakra. That's the 8th chakra. That's obtaining true nirvana and enlightenment. There are 7 chakras in the chakra system, but the 8th one is sort of at the back of your head. Very tricky. Yogis and gurus and Buddhist monks spend their whole life trying to unlock that, really to escape the wheel. The author kind of agrees more with the Hindus, though, that the nature of the wheel is that it's a cycle, and the cycle comes around. The Buddhists want to get off the wheel, but I now kind of think that that, even in of itself, is kind of futile. So I get into this in my story. It's featured quite a bit. I deal with themes of time loops and reincarnation. So the story's a little bit complicated, but yeah, there's this theme of deja vu. There's this theme of kind of living the same life over and over again. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But yes, it's dark stuff. I wouldn't say that I'm a Buddhist, but I was exposed to enough of it that it makes for interesting subject matter. So this next card is card number 8, Strength or Lust. So in the original Rider-Waite Tarot, this tarot, the card is called Strength. Aleister Crowley was a notorious sex fiend and pervert. He was a very strange, very dark guy. And so this is sort of, he changed strength to lust. He thought that lust was like a life force power thing. So it's a playful illustration. It's more of just a joke. And so it depicts yours truly and a woman that I used to be involved in. And it kind of speaks for itself. It's more like playful humor. It's based off of his deck. And he said a lot of things about lust. And no, I do not agree with Crowley on most things. He was just an interesting character, an interesting guy. He says a lot of things, and I don't want to spoil it, and I get into it in my story. He believed a lot of things about magic. And so, similar to Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter, he had this idea of a Horcrux. So, say someone's dying or very close to death, if you were, say, to touch them or something like that while they're dying, he believed that you would absorb some of their essence. And then he said that when we die, ultimately we die, but our soul, pieces of our soul can go to that other person, or they can go to the stars, and that we become basically the stars. He thought all the stars in the universe were dead souls, which is interesting. The guy was a total psychopath. I mean, he was extremely perverted, disgusting, did all sorts of really awful stuff. He even had a compound in Sicily, and when Mussolini and the fascists were coming up in Sicily, even Mussolini thought that he was heinous. And then there's this whole story where Mussolini basically sends a bunch of guys and they destroy his compound in Sicily. So he was a very dark, very disturbing guy, yes, a total psycho, but he said these very interesting spiritual things. It's sort of like how the broken clock is right twice a day kind of thing. He made some interesting points. He did prattle on from his syphilis corroded brain about all kinds of stuff. And so the author finds him to be an interesting character, and then yes, this card is basically just based off of him. I'm paying homage to him and to this deck. So this card is the Tower. The Tower's all about catastrophe, calamity, and disaster. This card has nothing to do with the story. Bart Simpson and the Simpsons in general predicted a lot of things, including 9/11. So again, it has nothing to do with the story. It's just a weird drawing that I came up with, but I think it captures the meaning of the card very nicely. Yes. And all on the side, again, the astrological and astronomy and other symbols and elemental symbols and signs, all there on the side. And yes, I think it's a nice illustration. So this next card is the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is, I use in my story, the Dungeons and Dragons ethical system. So they have, chaotic evil, lawful evil. This character is Jason. He's kind of like a chaotic neutral character, a mischief maker. And he's depicted this way, hanging upside down, hanging from a tree. And what's interesting is that the Hanged Man is a very popular tarot card. Ellen DeGeneres, or as I like to call her, Ellen Degenerate, she has a giant picture of the Hanged Man in one of her LA mansions. Now, a lot of the Hollyweird elite are into tarot, and my book exposes a lot of occultic concepts. I'm sort of bringing the darkness to light. Anyways, with her paintings of this, one of them is from the artist Basquiat. I'm not really pronouncing his name right. Basquiat, very famous artist. He did like graffiti style drawings. Anyways, he was big on something called the hobo code. So during the Great Depression, homeless people would put little markings on trees, at railroad crossings, and it was called the hobo code. Like, this place is a good place to eat something or sleep for the night or whatever. And she has a giant tarot version done by Basquiat, that famous artist. And yeah, there's a lot of weird symbolism and a lot of stuff with those Hollywood types. It's honestly my least favorite card in the tarot, but it's a card that's very popular. It doesn't really have a sinister connotation like some of the other cards, but it is a neat card. Honestly, I don't think that this drawing of mine does it justice, but it's a very popular card. In fact, one of the most popular. So that's why I'm going blah 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 on it. But honestly, it doesn't really grab me as much as some of my other cards. So all of these cards, I drew them as illustrations from my story, Sacred Heart of the Purple Dawn. So this next card is the Chariot. And very simply, it's a hearse. And it's driven by the description from my story. It ends off with the saying, a getaway driver with abandonment issues. And so this hearse is driven in the story by Clive, and he's the driver with abandonment issues. Not much to say about this card other than it implies a lot of rapid movement, a lot of changes, being in transition, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So as you can see, my tarot mat. And so this next card is the Moon, but I just wanted to get into this, maybe. Yes, you can see this is the Rider-Waite deck, and this is Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot deck. So my style and design, I combined basically both of these decks. I was very influenced by the art and the symbolism and the method. Of course, I add my own spin to it, but this is my mat and I do my readings, right? I spread out, I shuffle all the cards, and there's 85 cards in my deck. But this card, the Moon, pretty simple. The moon is a reflection of the sun. So you can see here, this is the Fujian moon goddess. So she's a goddess very popular in the South China Sea, in Macau, which is an island casino place in China that was originally a Portuguese colony. So all sorts of symbols here related to the moon. She's a goddess of the sea, and the cycles of the moon are very important. The ancients believed, especially in the Wiccan and pagan traditions, that a woman's menstrual cycle was linked to the cycles of the moon. So she's a feminine goddess, and she rules over the night. But it's not as negative as it seems. Like I said, the moon is like a reflection of the sun. So this card is a very positive omen. So the next card, well, we're not going in numerical order anymore. This is card number 17, the Star. So I have two versions of the star. The first one is the Star of Ishtar, the 8-pointed star. And so Ishtar was basically the worship of the planet Venus in the ancient Sumerian Babylonian religion. And it has some dark symbolism on it. The next one, this is the best version. I made a large version of it. Well, this isn't really a star at all. It's more like a sun. And so my book, Sacred Heart of the Purple Dawn, the Purple Dawn part of it's based off of a book called The Saturn Myth by David Talbot. And so, yeah, the theory with that is that Saturn used to be one of our original suns. We were a binary star system, and Saturn gave us light. They call it the Purple Dawn theory. And so this is Mars, then Venus, and then Saturn. And he gets into in this book that we looked at something that looked like this in the sky. And it was, tens of thousands of years ago. But that's why we have this 8-pointed star theme. We actually saw something like that. So you'd have to read his book to learn more about it. But I incorporated a lot of the themes of the Saturn myth into this card and into my story. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this card. I think it's one of my better pieces. So this next card's card number 19, the Sun. I don't have too much to say about the sun. Rays of optimism and sunshine. And my cards follow a pattern. So we got the elemental sign, we got the astrological signs. It's all stuff that you can look up. Google is your friend. Le soleil brille. So the sun is bright. So this next card is the World. So this depicts the Tree of Life, and you can see the Tree of Life here on this mat. The Tree of Life's very important. So my story uses something called gematria. So my story is entitled The Purple Dawn. So if you go and look into this gematria, there's a gematria calculator. So if you type in Sacred Heart of the Purple Dawn, it comes up with a numerical value. I believe it's 476 or something like that. The Tree of Life has the same gematria value. So gematria is a kind of code where it uses letters as a kind of number cipher. It's like a code. So words have a numerical value. So the word purple has the gematria value of 88. So you add up all the letters, like A is 1, B is 2, Z is 26, and all words have a number combination. They add up to something. So purple adds up to code 88, infinity. Anyway, so yes, Tree of Life's very important, and my story, the name of it, has the same gematria value as Tree of Life. So the Tree of Life was created after a battle in Norse mythology with Thor. And he battled with, you can see this tattoo on my arm. It's also depicted in card 14, Temperance or Art, the Ouroboros. So Thor has a battle with Jormungandr, which is the Ouroboros, the world snake. And after this battle, Thor is killed, and it gives birth to the World Tree, also known as Yggdrasil. So the Tree of Life is kind of like the Tree of Knowledge in the Garden of Eden. Yes, and the Norse were very influential on Christianity. So yes, the Tree of Life renews life. It's like a cycle, and the cycle comes around. And it depicts the world. It is an accurate representation of the world. It's a tree, and then its roots run deep. And so only by watering the roots can we truly renew life. And then we can taste of the forbidden fruit, the apple that's on the tree. So yes, it's a very important theme and subtext to my story, and gematria is something very important. Anyways, I get into it in my story, but I think it's a nice illustration of this concept. Well, good evening, boils and ghouls. This is William Vanstone. We're getting close to spooky Halloween season. Gonna talk about this card, the Rebus, the 23rd card of the Major Arcana. Very significant card. So we start off with card 0, the Fool goes through this alchemical process, this journey where he develops, where either he experiences each of the cards or becomes the cards or gets stuck on a card and goes through all of these Carl Jung archetypes. Basically leads us to the Rebus, the culmination of everything. So the Rebus was a creature created allegedly before Adam and Eve, according to the mythology, that was both man and woman, a perfect androgynous being, said to be like the perfect merging of masculine and feminine, like a hermaphrodite. So a supernatural creature. It was a botched experiment, and it kind of ties in with the transhumanism stuff and the stuff that's going on these days with all of the transsexuals and the whatnot. It's a very obscure card. It's not in most tarot decks. There's obscure stuff, lore on the internet, but yeah, it's not a standard card. It's not found in a lot of tarot decks. So my deck's kind of a merger of two different decks: the Thoth Tarot deck by Aleister Crowley, the depraved sex fiend and pervert and Satanist Aleister Crowley, and the Rider-Waite Tarot. But the Rebus isn't found in either of those decks. It's something else entirely. So this is a very special card. Special like me, special needs. So yeah, it says here, and you can't really see it, dat rosa mel aperbis, which I'm not reading the Latin very good. I have to brush up on my law school Latin. If I remember correctly, it means total horseshit. No, I'm just playing. It means it's the rose that gives the bees honey. Yeah, Obra Mayor, Obra Minor, the Alpha and the Omega, and Coitus. So it ties in with, and you can see the symbols in the corners of the cards, it ties in with the Philosopher's Stone in Harry Potter. So the Philosopher's Stone is all about immortality, living forever. If you could create this stone or drink its elixir, you would live forever. And that was something that Crowley was a part of through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. This is all conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat kind of stuff, but supposedly the Golden Dawn, well, there's theories about it. A good YouTube channel that I like called The Y-Files does a video on it where they were trying to basically take urine and through a distillation process believe that was the elixir to live forever. But it's complicated. So, Philosopher's Stone, living forever. So maybe that's not possible for human beings to do that, to live forever. So how can we do that? Well, the philosopher, he won a Nobel Prize for it, Ernest Becker. He wrote a book called The Denial of Death. So we live on through what he called symbolic immortality. So we leave behind a legacy. We create art, poetry, music, monuments, buildings, and we live on through them and leaving a legacy behind. So that's if we don't have children. But really the only way for a human being to live on forever, but maybe not in a real full-fledged sense, is through coitus, through a man and a woman coming together and having a child. And that's how we live on. That's a way we achieve a type of immortality, although it may not be possible. So it's this realization that all the other cards, the whole journey is leading to this realization that we're after a quest to live forever. And yeah, maybe that's not possible, so we'll have children, or we'll try to leave behind a legacy, and that's kind of the meaning of life. Franz Kafka, he was one of these existentialist writers. He was Czech. Weird guy. He was a government bureaucrat, early Soviet Union in the Czech Republic, around the time it got almost taken over. He wrote this book about the bureaucracy and the sort of the futile, absurd nature of bureaucracy. Basically, he gets jailed for a crime that they never tell him what crime he committed, and he's on trial, and he spends like 30 years in jail, and they never tell him what the crime is that he's committed. Wrote a lot of other interesting books too, like The Metamorphosis, about, transforming into different animals and insects and what it would be like to live through their sort of first person experience. And it was weird guy, interesting guy, but he said something very profound. The meaning of life is that it stops. So sure, maybe we're wrapped up in this quest for immortality, but in a way, death is the only thing that gives life meaning. If it were, say, to go on forever, really, what would it matter? We have a short time here. We're only here for a little while, and that makes life, the problem is not that life is meaningless, but just that it seems at this sort of sensory level, looking at the world and thinking about things, it seems to be so almost absurdly simple, but just profoundly meaningful in terms of value, and we live in this value-laden world. So just, yes, the short time frame we have gives it's too meaningful almost, in a weird sort of way. It's really hard for me to articulate what I mean exactly, but just, yeah, I used to buy into all of that, oh, life is meaningless and blah, 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 and yeah, no, it's actually the other way around. It's so simple at one level, but almost borderline incomprehensible, sort of beyond our understanding. One of many influences, H.P. Lovecraft, and so he was all about cosmic horror and deep time, and yeah, how life can seem meaningless, and in the grand scheme of things, you're like a speck of dust and all that kind of stuff. But he believed kind of in supernatural forces, and yeah, he was a very grim, pessimistic guy. But yeah, so my story delves into those themes, but this card is what the main character, he goes through this whole journey, and this is perhaps his ultimate realization, is getting to this card. And it ties in with some of the other cards, like number 14, Temperance Art, with the Ouroboros. He discovers that he's in a kind of time loop, and that really there is no death. There's only the eternal present, sort of the beginning is the end is the beginning. It's a kind of loop, a kind of snake eating its own tail. There is no past, there is no future. There's just an eternal present. And death is an illusion in a way, because of these things that we do through the rebus. It sort of will be the snake eating its own tail until, well, there is no beginning and there is no end. So yes, death is an illusion. There's no such thing as nothing. No such thing as total darkness. There's always something. And it may not live on in terms of your literal conscious experience, but you will be reborn in a sense. You will do this again. You will go through very similar archetypal experiences, but yeah, they'll lead to this realization. Anyways, well, I've gone on way too long, but it's an important card. In fact, it is, to me, the most important card in the entire tarot deck. Very positive omen, very positive sign. If you get it in a reading, it can counterbalance a lot of the other more negative cards, like the Tower and the Devil and some of the other ones. It really does change everything, and suggests to me in a reading, if somebody draws that card, that they're reaching similar realizations that yours truly, the author, William Vanstone, has discovered. So I hope that was edifying, and have a happy and spooky Halloween. And go and read my story. Yeah, it's for your own good. It's the Buckley's cold medicine. It tastes crappy, but it works. And you're going to get educated about a lot of things reading my story. Oh, yes, yes, indeed. All right, well, back to my lair.